We are heading into one of the most unpredictable times of the year in terms of weather. As winter loosens its grip and spring beckons on the horizon, pretty much anything can happen at any time. And I love it. The trick to rolling with the meteorological punches is having the right gear, and my Cleverhood Zipster is an indispensable part of my kit. Alone or layered over a puffer or fleece, it lets me brave the ever-changing elements and enjoy the wild ride of late winter to the fullest. Right now, through the end of February, you can get 15% off the Zipster and all the other great Cleverhood gear at cleverhood.com/waroncars. Just enter code KISSMEYOUFOOL at checkout and enjoy the ride.
The problem with American conversations about this is that brings up the R word, regulation, which is like this evil word in the United States, which is just ideology. I always say it's your ideology that's keeping you from succeeding. When I work with my American cities, you tell me what you want, I'll tell you how to get it. But if you say, I can't do that because it's against my ideology of zero regulation or regulation being bad, well, then you're not going to succeed. That's the truth of it.
This is the War on Cars. I'm Sarah Goodyear. Doug is away this week. We have got a terrific guest with us today who has a lot to say about building better cities and who speaks with a special kind of authority because he has actually done the work to make that change in cities around the globe. We'll get to that conversation in a moment, but first we have some quick business to take care of. If you like what we do here at the War on Cars, please support us on Patreon at patreon.com/thewaroncarspod. You can also order our new book, Life After Cars, Freeing Ourselves from the Tyranny of the Automobile, wherever books are sold. Find out more and learn all about our book tour at lifeaftercars.com. Okay, let's get to our guest. Brent Toderian has decades of experience in city planning, urban design, and transportation. He was chief planner for the city of Vancouver from 2006 to 2012, a time when the city hosted and was transformed by the Winter Olympics. As a consultant, Brent has advised and collaborated with folks in Auckland, Brisbane, Buenos Aires, Copenhagen, Göteborg, Groningen, Helsinki, Limerick, Medellin, New York, Oslo, Paris, Perth, Reykjavik, Rotterdam, and Sydney, just to name a few. He often sparks conversation on social media, where he is one of the most prominent voices advocating for more human and humane urban design. Brent Toderian, welcome to the War on Cars.
Hi, Sarah. Glad to be here.
Yeah, great to see you virtually. We just saw you not that long ago in Vancouver, where you live, and you showed us around some of the great stuff that you have there in Vancouver, including the famous Costco in an actual urban center, which is such a delight to see. So maybe we could talk a little bit about what you showed us there and some of the high points that you especially like to point out to visitors when you're showing them around Vancouver.
Well, boy, everybody wants to see that Costco lately, especially since I started posting it on social media. So we met downtown. I live downtown Vancouver. So for those who know the rest of the city and the rest of the region, who will say to you, you should have got out of the downtown. You shouldn't have stayed there. But, we had the time we had, and we were on foot, and we covered a lot of ground. The Yaletown neighborhood, which is the sort of original warehouse district that sprouted towers, but in a way that sort of matched and was design sensitive to the warehouse kind of character of the neighborhood. We walked down to the waterfront. You saw some of the best parts of the original waterfront transformation after Expo 86 in Vancouver. It really is a lot of that initial development along our waterfront that sort of put Vancouver and Vancouverism and the so-called Vancouver model on the map globally, where as a relatively smaller mid-sized city on a global scale, we certainly started punching above our weight in the urban conversation about better city making, and certainly here in North America, probably being the leader in that conversation in many ways. And then we stayed on the water. We came to my neighborhood. You saw the 4-story elementary school across the street from my building where my kids go to school. And I tell you, that's one of the things that breaks a lot of Americans' brains. It didn't break your brain because you're from New York City, but the idea of a vertical school is somewhat revolutionary in a downtown school. And when I explained that it was the second, we've since opened a third, we're about to open a fourth just around the corner from the downtown to accommodate the almost 10,000 kids and teenagers that are in our downtown peninsula, living right downtown. You know, in North America, where the common language or line is, don't bother trying to plan for families downtown because families don't want to be downtown. And I always say Vancouver is the proof that that's wrong, although most downtowns have been designed to virtually repel families. So not only do we have that many schools, and the daycare right beside, by the way, you can't swing a stick without hitting a daycare in our city center. And then right around the corner is the SkyTrain station, which is one of the many stations in the longest automated driverless light rail system in the world. And right beside the SkyTrain station is our urban Costco, our downtown Costco. It's the same size as the suburban ones. It sells pretty much the same stuff, although you can tell that it caters to an audience that's walking there and taking public transit with some of the things that they sell. And it's got towers above it. It's got not just a bit of tower, a lot of tower above it. There's 4 residential towers above it. Working with the slope of works quite well, so you can go in the Costco underneath, and you almost have a hard time realizing that there's a residential community above you, a very high density, tall residential community above you. And of course, we're starting to see, oh, and by the way, if I had taken you over the bridge, we didn't quite have enough time, you could have seen our urban Home Depot, where you've got a Home Depot, 3 mid-box category killers, a grocery store, and rental housing above, which is part of what I call the largest urban power center, vertical power center in North America. Maybe the only vertical power center in North America, but certainly the most distinctive one. So it shows that you can do these kind of big box and mid box retailers in urban settings if you do it in an urban way. You know, by the way, the Home Depot only has a little bit of frontage on the corner with liner shops and a great walkable street. So Home Depot and Costco haven't ruined the streetscape like they do in normal context. So I showed you that. And that's the other thing that, of course, breaks people's brain. And they say, I often get asked, why can you get Costco here? And, you know, I'm going to use this to force Costco to come to my downtown in my city. And I said, well, you have to understand how we got it, because we have probably 125, 130,000 people living in the downtown peninsula. We're the only major city in North America that said no to freeways. So it's not easy to drive to the suburbs when you live downtown. So they had this big captive population, this trade area that they wanted to get access to, that were not shopping in their suburban Costcos. So when they came, they said, we want to be downtown. Of course, like all these, Walmart, Home Depot, everyone, they want to do their suburban style, sea of parking, big box retailer downtown. And my predecessors, this happened before I was chief planner of Vancouver, had the intelligence and guts to say, nope, you want to come to an urban setting, you have to do it in an urban way. We're not banning Walmart, we're not banning Home Depot or Costco, but we're banning suburban versions of those, or suburban versions of anything. If you come downtown Vancouver, you have to do it in a highly urban, highly pedestrian-friendly, highly transit-supported way. And if not, don't let the door hit you on the way out of downtown kind of thing. So, and that's why it happened. One, they wanted the market they weren't getting. And a lot of cities don't have that market in their downtown, North American cities. Let's be honest about that. And two, they were forced to do it well. And Vancouver has a culture of being willing to force developers to not do things in a crappy way.
Well, I mean, all of that really goes to one of the things that struck me so much about Vancouver is that it is an outlier in North American cities, not just for its urban form and its, highly populated residential downtown, but especially because it is on the West Coast. It's west of the Mississippi, as we would say here in the United States. And I think I often hear from people who say, well, all of these cities are new. These were built after the invention of the automobile for, in large part, Western American cities. And you can't expect them to have the form that makes for a nice, dense urban lifestyle. That they were built for the car, and that's the end of the story. You hear this over and over again in the United States that, we just, and so
And
Vancouver,
sometimes in Canada too, I'll tell you.
Yeah, I'm not surprised because Canada has plenty of car brain culture as well. So I guess my question is, what historically and even now, what are the forces that have made Vancouver an outlier in this way? And what can other cities that were quote unquote built for the automobile learn from Vancouver?
Well, I buy that excuse, not because it's true, but because I at least understand the logic underneath it. I buy that excuse halfway because, yes, they were built later and thus had probably more of their growth since the 60s. So, yes, there's some truth to that. But look at the progressive cities on both of our countries' west coasts. You have the Portlands and the Seattles, and you have Vancouver and Victoria as a smaller city here in British Columbia. So you have progressive cities on the west side, not just politically progressive, but city building progressive, which I say is not political. It's not right or left. It's just smart or dumb. It's just successful or unsuccessful, frankly. And we've got all the receipts to prove that our cities work far better and are far more successful, including economically more successful than the other cities that do it the bad way. So, on the one hand, sure, you had more of your growth post-car, but there's also a sensibility perhaps on the west side of both countries that says we don't have to be stupid about these things. I also tend to think there's a temporal element. Like we often say that in Vancouver, we got to see the failures of the freeway battles in New York and Toronto, both involving Jane, ironically, because she had moved from New York to Toronto, Jane Jacobs. And so by the time the idea had crossed the country, we had a better sense how stupid it was. And so, but, I got to say, it wasn't the professionals, or at least most of the professionals, that knew it was stupid building around freeways. The freeways, we had a freeway plan in Vancouver. It would have lobotomized our waterfront. It would have decimated low-income but vibrant mixed communities. It would have done all the damage, maybe even more damage than most other North American cities saw. But it was the moms and the grandmothers who started, with some progressive politicians, who started the great freeway revolts. And it was a professional city planner, who I always point out was not a city planner. He was an English engineer, because there was no such thing as a city planning profession back then. It was all engineers. And who was very pro the freeways, and ultimately got killed by the moms and the grandmoms, not because they understood a better way of mobility and mode shift and such, but because it would have decimated low-income communities like Chinatown and Strathcona, etc. So they were fighting to protect diverse communities. But thank God they did for that reason, because for all sorts of reasons. I call it the most important moment in Vancouver history, because it set us on a path of saying, okay, if we're not going to have freeways violently penetrating the inner city and the downtown and the waterfront, how are we going to grow our downtown? Because our downtown, the famous skyline that we have now, didn't exist then. And the answer was SkyTrain. The answer was SkyTrain from a how do you go far perspective. And then from a how do you go near perspective, the answer was housing downtown, obviously. And it's so obvious it makes my brain hurt. And we all know that probably the most important thing, the most common answer I give about how to strengthen downtowns is, I always say there's no such thing as a silver bullet, but the closest thing to a silver bullet is more housing, because duh. But you got to remember, when Vancouver was doing this, everyone thought they were crazy in North America. Nobody wants to live downtown, and certainly no families want to live downtown. So I give credit for the vision, which is defined as, being able to see something that isn't there when everybody tells you you're crazy.
Yeah, and I will say that it was just incredibly visible to us when we were visiting and staying downtown that we had just come from Seattle and we'd been in San Francisco, and we had seen, even in those cities where the downtowns do have a lot of activity compared to some American cities, at night they just emptied out, and there was nothing there. Nobody there. It didn't feel necessarily safe on the street. And the contrast when we got to Vancouver was really dramatic because we saw people on the street. It felt safe. It felt inviting. There was a lot of activity, a lot of vibrancy. And that is just something that is so rare in so many of our North American cities. So you really
And by the
see.
way, Vancouverites listening to you right now I guarantee you they're saying, oh, Brent didn't take them to the downtown east side. Your talk was in the downtown east side. Your talk was
Yes.
at the Woodwards building, which was
Yep.
ground zero of the tensions of gentrification in the downtown east side. And we walked with your suitcases from
Yes.
Woodwards up to Steamworks on the waterfront, along Water Street in Gastown. So you were there.
Yep.
And nobody can say you avoided the places that would have made you feel unsafe. Now, admittedly, if you'd gone a few blocks the other way, you would have seen
Yeah.
some different scenarios, that a step up, but you were not in the pristine parts of the downtown, so to speak.
Yeah, and even, some of the pristine parts, I would have been worried that there wasn't anybody on the street because sometimes in a nice downtown like Seattle has some beautiful downtown stuff that, it's very pretty and it's clean and it's not scary at all. It's just empty at night. Like, there's just nobody there because
Right.
there's nothing to do and nobody lives there.
We're very big on body heat. Body heat, we tend to talk a lot about the SkyTrain being the alternative to the car. And it is at the regional scale. But walking was the primary alternative to the car. But to get walking, you needed the body heat. You needed the population. That took a long time. But it was based on my predecessor's strategy of the living first strategy. It was leaning in on housing, but not just housing. This is the mistake that so many North American, and I got to say particularly American cities make. It's they want housing. They want to convert some of those downtown parking lots. God help you, you got far too many of them, into housing. But you're not putting in the things that make the housing livable. So you're getting units and you're checking boxes and you've got a nice unit count. But are people driving out of the downtown to go to get their groceries, take their kids to school, etc.? If you don't have the amenities, if you don't have the walkable street design, if people are still trying to walk around on a tight sidewalk, on fast-moving one-way pair streets, that's still all designed for the car, then sure, you're getting the housing, but you're breaking what I call the urban contract. The urban contract is, if you want people to live downtown instead of somewhere else, you got to provide the good stuff. You got to provide the amenities. You got to provide the livable, multimodal design that makes car-free living not just possible, but enjoyable. And if you drop the ball on those elements, you've broken the contract. And why would they live downtown in an apartment where they still need a car? They don't get all the stuff that a real urban place provides. And they might even be paying more for that apartment than they would if they were buying or renting that apartment out in the suburbs. So the urban contract is very important. The work I did recently in Sacramento about how to get more housing built in Sacramento, we did a strategy with the Downtown Sacramento Partnership. I partnered with them. It was very big on the urban contract and the idea of it's not just the housing you need all the things that support the housing. And a lot of American cities and many Canadian cities are bad at that.
Yeah, we have seen that. We've now gone to 18 different cities on our book tour, and we have definitely seen downtowns that are trying with housing, but failing exactly on what you're talking about, the amenities that make it possible to live in a downtown and not have to use your car for groceries and the pharmacy and all of those good things that we need. And I think that, there's been a lot of attention on parking minimums getting rolled back or eliminated in many North American cities, and that's great. But I talked to a developer in Houston who said, parking minimum,
Yeah.
because I got to put parking in because nobody will live in these places
Right.
if there's
You
no
still have
parking.
two or even three. They were probably building more parking than the parking minimum required anyway.
Yeah, because nobody will live there otherwise, because guess what? They can't. And if you don't create a new reality for folks, right? A reality like you're talking about that's based on an urban contract, then you can't expect them to, what are they going to suffer and go without just on the principle of living in a downtown?
Right.
That's not how it works.
You need to have a lot of things to walk to. And it's not just it can't be the t-shirt, the specialty t-shirt economy or the ice cream economy. It's got to be the basics. The grocery store, and the one that often gets forgotten is the hardware store. Those kinds of things. You need to be able to walk to those. You need to be able to take public transit to the things that are further away. You need to be able to get your kids to school and daycare in a convenient way. You need all that, but then you also need all the experiences and such. And some downtowns are better at that than providing the basics. But you need to particularly design for families if that's what you want. And this is one of the big questions, that there's such a striking difference between Canada and the United States. Let's use Seattle and Vancouver as examples. They often get compared. We're sort of peer cities. We're friends on the West Coast. But you can tell which one of those cities is American, and you can tell which one of those cities is Canadian. And one of the big things is, I've been asked, well, how did Vancouver get all the families and the kids and Seattle didn't? And I said, well, both cities started off saying they wanted kids, but only one city mandated the things that would attract the kids. Guess which city it was? And it starts with, one, you need to mandate 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, or else you literally can't fit families. If all you have is studios and 1 bedrooms, which is what got built in Seattle, then it's game over. It's game over. You don't get the families. And in Vancouver, for example, we've been mandating percentage of the buildings to be 2 and 3 bedroom. Well, certainly 2 bedroom for many years, and then added 3 bedrooms. And that's been critical because, we've got families with 3 to 5 kids in apartments that are tight, but doable. It's tight, but doable, and they're trading space for the amenity that they can walk to, right? 2, you need to have all the things like daycare and schools and such that support living downtown. And 3, you need to design your public realm for kids, because that works for everyone. Playgrounds and even the streets. And what I find with American cities is they go right to number 3. Some big consulting firm will put out a study saying, here's how you design the public realm for families. Well, sorry, you already lost, because you don't have the homes that fit families, and you don't have the amenities that support everyday family living. So it doesn't matter if you have a playground. Mm-hmm. So you got to do those all 3 in that order is what I advise cities. And the problem with American conversations about this is that brings up the R word, regulation, which is like this evil word in the United States, which is just ideology. I always say it's your ideology that's keeping you from succeeding. You tell me what you want. When I work with my American cities, you tell me what you want. I'll tell you how to get it. But if you say, I can't do that because it's against my ideology of zero regulation or regulation being bad, well, then you're not going to succeed. That's the truth of it.
100%.
And by the way, all the regulation we do results in more financially successful housing, more financially successful neighborhoods. Our developers in Vancouver make far more money than any real estate on the west side, or probably anything. It's comparable to New York. Probably only New York is making sort of similar money, which is probably a big part of the problem, of course. Don't get me started on affordability, although we could certainly talk about that. But nobody could say that ideology is anti-commerce, it's anti-capitalism. Our Canadian developers literally have more certainty, more predictability, and more profit, which are all the things that developers say they want.
Right. So regulation provides those things.
And certainty and consistency, which is all things that the market wants. But it's your ideology about the R word that's keeping you from succeeding. In some cases. Some cities are getting past that, don't get me wrong. But it's always a bit of a fight I have to have. As soon as we have the conversation about how you would do it, I get the inevitable, we don't do that. We can't do that. But, you can if you want to.
let's pivot a little bit and talk about another really important part of what you do, which is I think that you're great at talking about communication and how advocates can communicate with practitioners and how they can also sometimes have some negative outcomes from some of the kinds of communications that they have. So, a lot of the people who listen to this podcast are advocates, activists. I know you make a distinction between those two things. And we also have a lot of researchers who come on, academics, people from the academic world. We don't have as many practitioners. So I would love to hear from the practitioner standpoint what you see as the most effective, the least effective, and sometimes counterproductive things that advocates and activists can do to, push their cities out of these ideological boxes that they're in sometimes, or these boxes where they're saying, well, this is just not something that can be done in our country, in our region, in our city, and help them to not only see the possibilities, but to build the political capital that they need to make some of these more healthy decisions. I mean, I think of it almost as like when you're trying to make your body healthier, you try to make every choice the healthier choice rather than, eat the salad rather than the pizza or whatever. I feel like in our cities, we have those choices that come too, that you can make a healthier choice, you can make the less healthy choice. So how do you see the role of advocates and activists in communicating with elected officials and planners, and also with, how those groups can help each other move toward healthier cities?
Okay, before I jump into that, I want to address your metaphor, because I'm big on the power of metaphor. Imagine the healthier choice that you're talking about, but it made you happier than the unhealthy choice. Imagine the healthy choice making you as happy as pizza, not as happy as Brussels sprouts.
Okay.
And that's what the data and the facts and the evidence shows. When we walk and we bike more, we know that makes us happier, right? The evidence actually shows that. But then we treat it like we're eating Brussels sprouts. No, hold on. Walking is pizza.
All right.
Cars are Brussels sprout, right?
Okay.
That's what the facts actually show. That's what the evidence and the data show. And I'm big on evidence, and I'm big on metaphor, and we've got to change some of these narratives, right? Like we're not doing these things because they're good for us.
Bicycling is obviously ice cream in this equation.
It's ice cream.
Okay, all right.
It makes us happier than the alternatives, and it works better, and it provides more freedom, that word that you folks love in your country, or at least did until recently, I suppose. But, if you want freedom, you want choice. You want ice cream and mixed in. Anyway, I'm now obliterating the metaphor. Here's the point. Yes, I'm well aware that I might be the only practitioner, or at least certainly part of a small group of practitioners that get mixed in with book writers and media folks and podcasters and such. And there's a very simple reason for that. My professions are mind-numbingly boring. And most of the people who are in it manage to take something that is inherently sexy and interesting and cool, like cities. Like, who doesn't think cities aren't, not only we've called it the most significant or intelligent collective thing humanity's ever created. They're cool, they're sexy. And yet my profession somehow manages to make them mind-numbingly boring. Like, try to read a planning report if you want to get some sleep.
I've done it.
Yeah. So, and when I was young in my career, I've been a city planner for 33 years. And by the way, I considered using that word, city planner, because I was so frustrated with my own profession and it wasn't a good brand. But then I thought, no, hell no, I am a city planner. I'm an urban designer. I'm a change agent. I'm all these things. I'm an urbanist, but I'm not giving up on city planning. I'm going to change it from within, because city planners too often roll their eyes at the external critic who says, city planning needs to change. So I am a city planner, and city planning needs to change. It needs to change not only in its content and what it considers right and wrong, but it sure as hell needs to change in terms of its communication, its lack of persuasiveness. Because, my profession has for far too long shrugged its shoulders and said, well, the decision makers didn't listen to us. Oh, well, on to the next thing. Well, no. Why weren't you more persuasive? Why couldn't you find a way to get the point across, to make the dumb things harder and the smart things easier? Because we are advocates, and this is to your first word. I actually had some bosses when I was young say to me, you can't be an advocate. You have to be neutral. And that is so fundamentally and profoundly wrong. We are advocates for better city building. We're advocates for better outcomes. We're open-minded, constantly open-minded. I change my mind daily on things with new information. But we are always advocating for the better outcome. And I think passionately and persuasively should be advocating. But, somewhere along the lines, the technocratic definition of our profession decided that we were going to be boring, we were going to be safe, we're not going to challenge politicians and make it hard for them to make the wrong decisions, because then they might be mad at us because we made them look bad or something. All of these narratives that I've gotten my entire career and by the way, I was told, you'll never get anywhere in city planning if you try to do that. And I've managed to prove that profoundly wrong. So, and when I became chief planner of Vancouver at 36 years old, the youngest chief planner in the city's history, and in a city where the chief planner has the most power of any city in North America. I say that not to brag. I say that because I achieved that doing all the things that people told me I can't do. And it's important. And when I took that position, I publicly was talking about all the things I was told I couldn't do in this role. And I'm going to do them because now I'm a leader in the profession, and it's the leaders of the profession that get to decide or message what's appropriate and not appropriate in the profession. And so, all the people who told me I couldn't use the word beauty in a conversation, all the people that told me I couldn't, say this or that, I say all of them, I said all of them, and I advanced quicker than any of those people did. So, and that was, I say that not to brag, I say that to prove the proof of concept. It's proof of concept that you can do it a different way. Now, I've had people say to me, and here's the difference between advocate and activist. I've had people say to me, well, that's all well and good, Brent. Maybe that worked for you, but I actually got asked this in a question in a Q&A session when I was presenting to a provincial, which is the equivalent to states in the United States, a provincial planning association. I don't know, 500 to 1,000 people in the audience. And someone in the Q&A afterwards said, that's all well and good, Brent. I was giving this talk while chief planner, telling planners that they can do this. And the person said, that's all well and good, but here in this city, and I won't tell you which city it was in, someone got fired for doing that. And I said, well, hold on, tell me what they did. And what they did was they basically publicly went against the recommendation of their own department because they disagreed with it, wrote an op-ed piece in the paper disagreeing with it, showed up with a placard and a button with the line through it, and basically said, my colleagues are all wrong, or even maybe suspect, right? And I said, well, hey, no wonder they got fired, because you can be an advocate, but you cannot be an activist. And you cannot do what the worst kinds of activists do, which frankly is, sometimes tell lies in order to try to win. And I've seen activists do that. I've seen some professionals do that, but it's common technique in activist circles. And you can't, if you're a professional city planner, you can't cross that line and become an activist. But should you be an advocate, and I do make that distinction, should you be a champion for better ideas and better outcomes and actually seeing them realized? Absolutely. Or else, what good are you, honestly?
Yeah. But from the perspective of people who are on the outside of the halls of power, what are some of the communications techniques that do work to get through to people who do have power?
So first of all, it helps that, I'm naturally wired to be blunt. I'm very comfortable on stage, these kinds of things. So my communication style helps, but I've leaned into my communication style more and more every year by talking just more and more normal, more and more human. So goal number one is talk and write as a professional like you talk and write as a human, usually. Because we somehow, I don't know why we decided we can't talk like normal human beings or write like normal human beings when we write reports. God, they're so unreadable. What I did was I became obsessed with a better approach to communication in my 20s and 30s. And I practiced. I started writing articles for professional magazines. Then I started writing articles for not professional magazines. And for 3 or 4 years, I did a radio show on CBC radio here in Canada with a regular segment on city making where I would talk about timely issues. And I'd do it in the radio because it would force you to learn how to not be boring and talk in a way that normal people are interested in hearing while they're driving, mostly driving to work, because people aren't listening to the radio as often, at least on other modes. And social media. Social media I got big into because it was a way of testing my message. It was persuasive. A lot of my slides, a lot of my messages started off as tweets back when Twitter was sane. I have slides that have a phrase like that are exactly 140 characters long because they started as a tweet. And I would see how many reposted, retweeted, and I said, oh, that's resonating. So I'm adjusting it. I try it again a few months later. Slightly.
That's the data side. That's the data side of you.
Well, you're testing, you're experimenting. And what works is what matters. Every once in a while, I will do a post and it will not get reposts. And I'm like, it was so good. I was convinced it was good, but it didn't. And I might try it again, and it still didn't. And I said, well, I have to accept it. It's not as good as I think it was. It's not working, so I dump it.
Yeah.
And I look for, and we talk about in planning professions, the way they say that we're going to clean up the communication is to get rid of jargon. And it's 3-letter acronyms, which are just the worst. And every planner in every city has different 3-letter acronyms, which drive me batty. And absolutely, you should get rid of that. But you don't get rid of brands. You create brands. I brand every idea I can think of. I take other people's brands if they're good. I've been credited for certain brands that have been around for a long time. And I said, I didn't invent it. I just liked it. And I saw that it worked. And so now it's associated with me because it gets big retweets or big posts. But it worked. It worked. It resonates. It sticks in people's brains. It makes them think differently. And people would say to me, oh, that's jargon. No, it's not. It's branding your ideas. And I'm somewhat obsessed with how marketing and, the forces of evil can use marketing to do great damage in our profession, certainly around car dependency and dominance, car brain, because they understand how marketing works.
So that seems like a good way to move to an exciting announcement that you have about communications and communications strategies. So you told me you have a new project coming up. Could you explain that?
Well, I told you that you were getting the scoop because you happened to ask me to come on your show right now. And we're just putting the finishing touches on the soft launch of something that's going to come out by the time this podcast goes live. I've joked that I've almost stopped thinking about how to be a better city planner decades ago. I'm 34 years into my career. It's not true. It's a nice joke, but it's not true. I'm constantly obsessed with getting to be a better city planner. But what I'm really focusing on is to be a more effective city planner, more persuasive. And that's about communication, marketing, branding, etc. And how to position your work for success rather than failure. Because my plans succeed. They don't fail. And if they fail, I blame myself for not being more successful in how to position them for success. So that's been at least the last 10 years of my career. And I come at communications and marketing from the perspective of the practice, because I'm a practitioner. I'm not a journalist. I'm not a writer, etc. But I greatly admire the people out there who've come to the practice from the communication side. You and Doug are in that category. You are from from the communication side, and you've come to the content of better city making, less car dependency, etc. And you generally come to the content with better communication, more effective communication. And I've learned a lot from the advocates who are not practitioners like me. I want to be at least as persuasive as the non-practitioners, while knowing what a practitioner knows, and particularly a practitioner with my rather unusual experience, because not all city planners know what they're talking about, to be honest. So I've always kept track of the people like yourselves who were doing a good job with the communication and breaking through and resonating. Tom Flood is someone your listeners probably know, a Canadian former marketing guy, ad guy who used to work for car companies, and now he uses his powers for good and applies his creativity to particularly street violence and safety of streets issues and such. And he's very good at bringing things down to the human level, how people think about their day and their lives and their family, etc.
Yeah. Tom's great, and he talks about disrupting. He also talks about the ability that these things that he does have to disrupt the patterns of people's thinking. And and we'll link to some of Tom's work as well in the notes for this. But go ahead.
And Grant Ennis is he's an American who now lives in Paris, and he's done a lot of interesting work. But his particular impact is his book Dark PR. And I think you've had him on your show too.
We did indeed.
And that book is a fantastic book because it reveals all the ways we're being manipulated by marketing campaigns, framing of issues, political, commercial, ideological, etc. And so I struck up these friendships with Tom and Grant and others, and just to make my work better and more effective. And eventually I had this thought that we should collaborate on something. So I pitched to them the idea of creating some sort of a thing, an organization, a movement, something. And it's ironic, I was talking about this before things got particularly bad, another level up on the disinformation side of things. But after the tinfoil hat folks had started going after 15-minute cities and other issues like that and low traffic neighborhoods, after that, and said we should do something to go right at the disinformation. It's a communication movement, but it's focused on cities. And so I pitched that to Grant and Tom, and they liked it. So the three of us are about to launch what we call the Urban Truth Collective. And it starts with the three of us, but we wanted to expand beyond that. And basically, our website, our social media accounts will hopefully have gone live by the time this podcast lands. Please look for them. Either look for Urban Truth or Urban Truth Collective on the various platforms. Certainly Blue Sky, LinkedIn, Instagram, etc. So the intention is that we're not just a clarity group where we're going to fact check. We are probably going to do that, but we're going straight at the liars and straight at the lying campaigns. Its whole purpose and what makes it different from other professional associations that might put out a frequently asked questions list or a fact check, and nobody pays attention to it, frankly. So the lies are incredibly successful and the clarifications are almost non-existent. We want to make a significant impact in the sphere of cities and this sphere of city making. We're not going to apply our truth telling and calling out the lies on everything. That would be exhausting.
I don't know. I don't know that anybody has the capacity for that.
But specifically on the cities, and we're going to be doing actual campaigns. The point of being able to team up with people like Tom is we can actually put out campaigns. To deliberately call bullshit, to use a technical term, on these not just wrong things, but deliberate lies, right? And so we're very excited about it. All three of us are doing it off the side of our desks, so we're going to see, and they're all busy desks, so we're going to see how it goes. But we'd like, this is a soft launch on your podcast, so we hope folks who listen to it will go looking for those social media accounts first. Follow us. We want to start building up an audience. We're going to be talking to other podcasters, putting out op-eds, doing interviews with various publications to just get the word out about what we're doing. And we'll be positioning ourselves for making a lot of collaborations with different folks like yourself. And then we'll be putting out campaigns. It's going to be a constant communication effort through our social media platforms, but we're also going to be dropping bombs. And the bombs are going to be these campaigns that we start to put out that just call out some of the lies. It's about telling the truth in a more persuasive way, but it's also specifically about calling out the lies.
I love it. It's something that is so needed in this realm, and maybe it can provide a model for people in other realms as well, because you're right, you can't take on all the lies. It's quite overwhelming. But I'm really excited to see what the three of you get up to, because you each bring something really special to the effort. So I think that's you have something else to say?
No, just it's been so long since I said the name, so I'll say it again. Urban Truth Collective. And I think on the various platforms, we've either taken Urban Truth or Urban Truth Collective. So look for both.
Okay, well, we will put links to all of that in the show notes as we are able, as things launch. And Brent, Toderian, thank you so much for being here at the War on Cars and for everything that you've shown us about the beautiful city of Vancouver.
My pleasure. Glad to be here.
That's it for this episode of the War on Cars. Thanks again to Brent Toderian. We'll put links to all of his work and his new enterprise, the Urban Truth Collective, in the show notes. Remember, you can support us and get exclusive bonus content, pre-sale access to live show tickets, free stickers, and more by signing up on Patreon at patreon.com/thewaroncarspod. A big thanks to everyone who supports the War on Cars, including our top contributors, Charlie G. of Human Powered Law in Portland, Oregon, Mark Hedlund, Virginia Baker, and Brandon DeCoster. And please, pick up a copy of our new book, Life After Cars, Freeing Ourselves from the Tyranny of the Automobile, wherever you get your books. You can also find us on tour. Learn more at lifeaftercars.com. Thanks also to our friends at Cleverhood. Listeners of the War on Cars can save 15% on the best gear for cycling and walking now through the end of February with code KISSMEYOUFOOL. Just go to cleverhood.com/waroncars. The War on Cars is produced with support from the Helen and William Mazer Foundation. This episode was edited by Samantha Gatzek. Our theme music is by Nathaniel Goodyear. Transcripts are by Russell Gregg. Our logo is by Danny Finkel. I'm Sarah Goodyear, and on behalf of my co-host, Doug Gordon, this is the War on Cars.